Kiwan wiped sweat from his forehead as he struggled with the cargo lift. The metal container weighed only 500 pounds, but his human muscles shook under the strain. Around him, his alien crewmates moved similar containers like they were made of paper. "Move faster, Softskin." Veltar's voice cut through the noise of the salvage bay. The reptilian crew chief stood 8 feet tall, his green scales gleaming under the station lights. His yellow eyes watched Kiwan with disgust. "My grandmother could lift that box and she has been dead for 50 years. The other workers laughed. Nimbo, the insectoid engineer, clicked his mandibles in amusement. His forearms moved 3 boxes at once while Kiwan still fought with his single container. "Humans are so weak," Nimbo buzzed. "Why do we even keep them on the crew?" Kiwan said nothing. He had learned long ago that talking back only made things worse. He focused on moving the container to its proper place on the loading dock. His arms burned, but he would not give up. He never gave up. Gorthak, the massive crystalline being, walked past carrying a container that weighed 2 tons. The crystal giant did not even seem to notice the weight. His voice rumbled like an earthquake. Perhaps the human should work in the kitchen instead. Cooking food requires less strength. More laughter echoed through the bay. Kiwan's face turned red, but not from the effort of lifting. He felt the familiar burn of shame in his chest. Every day was the same. Every day they reminded him that he was the weakest link in their salvage crew. "That is enough," said a quiet voice from behind him. Bora walked over with a datapad in her hands. She was the only other human on Nexus Point Station, working as their communications officer. Her dark eyes showed anger at the treatment Kiwan received. "Leave him alone, Veltar." The reptilian crew chief turned his attention to her. Oh, another soft skin speaks up. "Tell me, Bora, why should we keep your friend when he does half the work of anyone else here?" Bora stood straight, meeting Veltar's gaze. "Because he works twice as hard as anyone else to get that half done. And because he never complains, unlike some people I know." Veltar's forked tongue flicked out in annoyance. Hard work means nothing without results. This is a business, not a charity for weak species. Kiwan finally got his container in place. He turned to face the group, his breathing heavy but his voice steady. "I am ready for the next job. Are you?" Veltar's eyes gleamed with something mean. "Good, because I have the perfect assignment for our human friend." The salvage bay fell quiet. Even the hum of the station's engines seemed to fade. When Veltar smiled, it never meant anything good. "There is a derelict ship in the Forbidden Drift," Veltar continued. "It has been sending out strange energy readings. Someone needs to go and check it out." Bora stepped forward. "The Forbidden Drift is dangerous. Ships that go there sometimes do not come back. The radiation levels alone could kill someone." "Exactly," Veltar said, "which is why I am sending our expendable crew member." He looked directly at Kiwan. "Unless, of course, you are too scared to handle a real job." Kiwan felt all eyes on him. He knew this was a setup. Veltar wanted him to refuse so he could call him a coward, or maybe Veltar hoped he would accept and never come back. Either way, the reptilian would win. "I will do it," Kiwan said simply. Nimbo's antennae twitched in surprise. "The human actually said yes? I thought for sure he would run away crying." "When do I leave?" Kiwan asked, ignoring the insult. Veltar seemed almost disappointed that Kiwan had not backed down. "Tomorrow morning. You will take Salvage Pod 7. It is the oldest one we have, but it should be good enough for this mission. Of course it would be the oldest pod." Kiwan nodded. "I will be ready." As the work shift ended, Kiwan and Bora walked together toward the living quarters. The station was huge, home to thousands of beings from dozens of different species. Humans made up less than 1% of the population. "You do not have to do this," Bora said as they walked. "I can file a complaint with station management." "This is clearly a punishment detail." Kiwan shook his head. "It will not matter. They will just find another way to get rid of me. At least this way I might find something valuable in that ship. And if you do not come back?" Kiwan was quiet for a long moment. They passed a group of tall, blue-skinned aliens who looked at them with curious expressions. Humans were still a novelty to many species. "Then I guess they will not have to worry about the weak human anymore," Kiwan finally said. Bora grabbed his arm. "Do not talk like that. You are not weak, Kiwan. You are different. There is a difference." "Is there?" Kiwan asked. "Look around us, Bora. Every species here is stronger, faster, or smarter than we are. The Velkani can see in 12 different light spectrums. The Zephyrians can survive in space without suits. The Gorax can lift 10 times their body weight. What can humans do that is special? Bora was quiet. It was a question that both of them had wondered about many times. Humans had joined the galactic community only 50 years ago. They were among the newest and seemingly weakest species in known space. I do not know, Bora admitted, but I believe there is something. Maybe you will find it out there in the drift. That night, Kiwan lay in his small quarters looking out at the stars. Tomorrow he would fly into one of the most dangerous regions of space in an old salvage pod. The smart thing would be to refuse and accept whatever punishment Veltar had planned. But Kiwan had never been one to take the smart path. He had always chosen the hard path, the path that required him to prove himself over and over again. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time he would find something that would make all the struggle worth it. As he drifted off to sleep, Kiwan did not know that his journey to the Forbidden Drift would change everything. Not just for him, but for all of humanity. The species that everyone called weak was about to discover a truth that had been hidden for thousands of years. The salvage pod would take him to his destiny. And his destiny would shake the galaxy. Kiwan sat in the pilot seat of Salvage Pod 7, watching the stars change as he flew deeper into the Forbidden Drift. The old ship shook and rattled with every movement. Warning lights blinked on the control panel, but Kiwan ignored them. The pod was falling apart, but it would have to be enough. The Forbidden Drift stretched out before him like a graveyard of metal and dreams. Hundreds of dead ships floated in the darkness, their hulls twisted and broken. Some were so old that no one remembered what species had built them. Others were recent wrecks, ships that had come here looking for treasure and found only death instead. Kiwan's radio crackled to life. Bora's voice came through the static.
Kiwan, are you there?
Your signal is getting weak. I am here, Kiwan replied, adjusting the communication system. I just entered the main drift area. There are more ships here than I expected. Be careful, Bora said. I have been researching this area. Ships have been disappearing here for over 3,000 years. Some say the region is cursed, Kiwan almost smiled. I do not believe in curses, Bora. Just bad luck and dangerous radiation. Maybe. But promise me you will not take any unnecessary risks. I promise, Kiwan lied. He was already taking an unnecessary risk just by being here. The radio signal faded as Kiwan flew deeper into the drift. His sensors picked up the energy reading that had brought him here. It was strong, much stronger than anything the station's long-range scanners had detected. Whatever was generating this energy was big. Kiwan followed the signal through a maze of floating debris. Pieces of ships from a dozen different time periods drifted past his window. He saw hull fragments with writing in languages that had been dead for centuries. The sight made him feel small and alone. After an hour of searching, Kiwan found the source of the energy reading. A massive ship hung in space ahead of him, larger than any vessel he had ever seen. It was not destroyed like the other wrecks. Instead, it looked like it was sleeping, waiting for someone to wake it up. The ship's design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. It was not Velcani or Zephyrian or any other known species. The hull was dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols were carved into its surface, glowing faintly with blue energy. What are you? Kiwan whispered to himself. He flew closer, scanning the ship with his instruments. The readings made no sense. The ship was old, older than galactic civilization itself, but somehow it was still generating power. Life support systems were active. The ship was not dead at all. Kiwan found a docking port on the ship's side. It was the right size for his salvage pod, which was strange. Most ancient ships had docking systems that did not work with modern vessels, but this port seemed designed to accept his ship. As the docking clamps locked into place, Kiwan felt a shiver run down his spine. Something about this felt familiar, like coming home after a long journey, but that was impossible. He had never been here before. Kiwan put on his environment suit and checked his equipment. The ship's atmosphere readings showed breathable air, but he was not taking any chances. He opened the airlock and stepped into the ancient vessel. The corridor beyond was dark, but emergency lighting activated as soon as he entered. The lights were a warm yellow color that reminded him of Earth's sun. The hallway was the perfect height for a human, neither too tall nor too short. Kiwan found that strange. Most alien ships were built for different body types. He walked down the corridor, his boots echoing in the silence. The walls were covered with symbols that looked almost familiar. They reminded him of human writing, but older somehow, like seeing a distant relative's face in an old photograph. Kiwan turned on his communicator and tried to reach Bora, but the ship's hull blocked the signal. He was truly alone now. He should have felt scared, but instead he felt calm. This place did not feel dangerous. It felt like sanctuary. The corridor led to a larger room filled with workstations and displays. Kiwan recognized some of the equipment, even though he had never seen anything like it before. His hands moved to the controls without conscious thought, as if muscle memory was guiding him. When he touched the main console, the room came alive. Holographic displays appeared in the air, showing star maps and data streams. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, and somewhere in Kiwan's mind, understanding began to bloom. The ship's computer spoke to him in a language he did not recognize, but somehow he understood every word. It told him about the ship's purpose, about the beings who had built it, about a great war that had been fought in the darkness between stars. Kiwan staggered backward, overwhelmed by the flood of information. Images flashed through his mind. He saw humans, but not like any humans he knew. These were taller, stronger, dressed in armor that gleamed like starlight. They fought against creatures of shadow and nightmare, protecting younger species who cowered behind them. The Guardians, Kiwan whispered, the word coming from somewhere deep in his memory. The ship's computer confirmed what he somehow already knew. This was a Guardian vessel, built by an ancient human civilization that had ruled the galaxy long before any of the current species had developed spaceflight. The Guardians had been protectors, fighting to keep the galaxy safe from threats that came from the spaces between universes. But something had gone wrong. A great sacrifice had been made. The Guardians had given up their power, their technology, their very memories to stop an enemy that would have destroyed all life in the galaxy. The survivors had been scattered across the stars, their abilities sealed away, their true nature hidden even from themselves. Kiwan learned all of this in moments, the ship's systems downloading the knowledge directly into his mind. But even as he absorbed the information, he could barely believe it. Humans were the weakest species in the galaxy. They had no special abilities, no great technology. How could they have once been the most powerful civilization in known space? The answer came as Kiwan explored deeper into the ship. He found rooms that had been designed for training, for meditation, for connecting with something greater than oneself. He found weapon systems that could crack planets and shields that could stop stars, all of it powered by something the ship's computer called the inner fire. Every human carried this fire within them, the computer explained. But it had been dampened, hidden, locked away to prevent humanity from repeating the mistakes that had led to the great catastrophe. Only in times of desperate need would the seals break and allow humans to access their true potential. Kiwan continued exploring, making his way toward the ship's heart. He passed through chambers filled with ancient artifacts and rooms that showed signs of recent habitation. Someone had lived here perhaps for centuries, maintaining the ship and waiting for the right person to find it. At the center of the ship, Kiwan found a sealed door marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The ship's computer warned him that what lay beyond was dangerous, that it was not yet time for the seals to be broken. But Kiwan could feel something calling to him from the other side of that door, something that would change everything. He placed his hand on the door's surface, and the ancient metal grew warm under his touch. The symbols began to shift and change, reacting to his presence. Deep within the ship, systems that had slept for millennia began to wake up. Kiwan did not know it yet, but his journey into the Forbidden Drift was about to become something much more than a simple salvage mission. He was about to discover that being human meant something very different than he had ever imagined. The door in front of him was the key to humanity's forgotten past, and behind it waited the power to change the galaxy's future. The sealed door opened with a sound like a sigh, as if the ship itself had been holding its breath for thousands of years. Cool air flowed out from the chamber beyond, carrying with it the scent of metal and something else Kiwan could not identify, something that reminded him of lightning and starlight. Kiwan stepped through the doorway and gasped. The chamber was huge, its ceiling lost in shadows above. But what took his breath away was what stood in the center of the room. A suit of armor waited there, suspended in a pillar of soft blue light. It was clearly made for a human, but unlike any armor Kiwan had ever seen, the metal was dark as space itself. but lines of energy ran across its surface like veins of liquid starlight. The helmet was elegant and fierce, designed to inspire both awe and terror in those who saw it. Kiwan walked closer, his footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. As he approached, the armor seemed to respond to his presence. The energy lines grew brighter, and the blue pillar of light began to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "What are you?" Kiwan whispered, reaching out toward the armor. The moment his fingers touched the metal, the world exploded into light and sound. Kiwan felt like he was falling through space and time, tumbling through the memories of a civilization that had existed long before his birth. He saw the galaxy as it had been millennia ago. Young species struggling to survive on hostile worlds, threatened by creatures that came from the darkness between dimensions, and standing guard over them all were the Guardians, humans who had evolved beyond their physical limitations to become something greater. The visions showed Kiwan the truth about his species. Humans had not always been weak. They had been the strongest force in the galaxy, blessed with an inner fire that allowed them to channel the very energy of creation itself. They had built ships that could cross the galaxy in moments and weapons that could reshape reality. But power without wisdom led to corruption. Some Guardians began to see other species as inferior, as pets to be protected rather than equals to be respected. Wars broke out among the Guardians themselves. The galaxy burned as gods fought gods, caring little for the mortals caught in between. Finally, the wisest of the Guardians made a terrible choice. They would sacrifice their power to save the galaxy from their own destructive nature. Using ancient technology, they sealed away humanity's abilities and scattered their people across the stars. The Guardians became myths, then legends, then forgotten stories. But the seals were not permanent. They were designed to break when humanity had learned humility, when they were ready to use power for protection rather than domination. The armor Kiwan touched was a test and a key, waiting for someone who embodied the best of human nature. The visions faded, leaving Kiwan gasping on the chamber floor. The armor had detached itself from its display and now stood before him, no longer suspended in light. It looked like it was waiting for him to make a choice. "I am not special," Kiwan said aloud. "I am the weakest human on the station. How can I be worthy of this?" The ship's computer spoke, its voice now warm and familiar. "Strength is not measured by the weight you can lift or the speed you can run. It is measured by your willingness to stand when others fall, to protect when others would abandon, to try when others would give up. You have shown this strength every day of your life." Kiwan thought about all the times he had been mocked and humiliated by his crewmates. He could have quit, could have found easier work somewhere else, but he had stayed, had kept trying, had refused to let their words break his spirit. "The armor chooses its wearer," the computer continued. "It has waited 3,000 years for someone like you. Someone who understands that true power comes not from being above others, but from lifting others up." Kiwan stood slowly, his legs shaking from the intensity of the visions. He looked at the armor again, and this time he saw it differently. It was not a symbol of dominance or superiority. It was a tool, a responsibility, a burden that he would carry for the sake of others. "What happens if I put it on?" he asked. "You become what humanity was always meant to be," the computer replied. "A guardian, a protector, a bridge between the weak and the strong. But the choice is yours, Kiwan. Once you don the armor, there will be no going back to your old life." Kiwan thought about his life on Nexus Point, the daily humiliations, the constant struggle to prove himself, the knowledge that he would never be accepted as an equal by his alien crewmates. Then he thought about Bora, the only person who had ever shown him kindness. He thought about all the humans scattered across the galaxy, trying to find their place in a universe that saw them as inferior. Maybe it was time for that to change. Kiwan reached for the armor, and it responded by opening like a flower. The backplate separated, revealing an interior lined with soft material that seemed to glow with its own inner light. As Kiwan stepped into the armor, it closed around him like a second skin. The transformation was immediate and overwhelming. Kiwan felt power flowing through his body, not just physical strength but something deeper. He could sense the energy patterns of every living thing around him. He could feel the ship's systems responding to his thoughts. Most amazingly, he could feel other humans across the galaxy, distant sparks of potential waiting to be awakened. The armor's helmet sealed around his head, and suddenly Kiwan could see in spectrums of light he had not known existed. Information flowed across his vision, tactical data, energy readings, structural analyses of everything around him. But unlike the cold mechanical interfaces he was used to, this felt warm and alive, like the armor was an extension of his own mind. "How do you feel?" the ship's computer asked. Kiwan flexed his hands and watched as energy crackled between his fingers. He felt like he could tear apart the station with his bare hands or gently pick up an egg without breaking it. The armor gave him perfect control over his enhanced abilities. "I feel—" Kiwan paused, searching for the right words. "I feel like myself, but more. Like I have been asleep my whole life and only now am I waking up." "That is because you have been," the computer said. "All humans have been. The seals on your species' abilities are beginning to weaken. Soon others will start to awaken as well, and they will need someone to guide them, to teach them how to use their power responsibly." Kiwan understood. This was not just about him becoming stronger. This was about preparing humanity for a new chapter in their story. The weak species that everyone mocked was about to remember what they had once been. But with that memory would come danger. The enemies that the original Guardians had fought were still out there, waiting in the darkness between worlds. They had been patient, knowing that eventually the seals would weaken and humanity would reclaim their power. When that happened, the war that had ended 3,000 years ago would begin again. Kiwan felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He was no longer just a salvage worker trying to prove himself to his alien crewmates. He was the first of a new generation of Guardians, charged with protecting not just humanity but all life in the galaxy. The armor's systems showed him displays of deep space, scanning for threats that most technology could not detect. And there, at the very edge of sensor range, Kiwan saw something that made his blood run cold. Ships were moving in the darkness beyond the galaxy's rim, ancient ships built by creatures that had fought the original Guardians eons ago. They were coming, drawn by the awakening of human power like sharks sensing blood in the water. Kiwan realized that his time of preparation was over before it had really begun. The test was about to become a war, and he was the only Guardian ready to fight. The salvage pod that had brought him to this ship suddenly seemed very small and fragile. But it would have to do. Kiwan had a crew to return to, a station to protect, and a species to awaken. The real work was just beginning. Kiwan returned to Nexus Point wearing his old clothes over the armor. The ancient technology had somehow compressed itself to fit perfectly under his regular outfit, invisible to casual observation, but ready to activate at a moment's notice. He could feel its presence like a second heartbeat, steady and reassuring. As his salvage pod docked with the station, Kiwan tried to act normal. But everything felt different now. He could sense the life force of every being on the station, could feel the flow of energy through the ship's systems, could even detect the emotional states of people around him. The transformation was complete, but he was not ready to reveal it yet. "Kiwan," Bora ran to meet him as he exited the docking bay. Her face showed relief mixed with curiosity. "You made it back. I was so worried. Did you find anything interesting in that derelict ship?" "Just some old technology," Kiwan said, which was technically true. "Nothing valuable enough to make the trip worthwhile." Veltar approached with his usual swagger, flanked by Nimbo and several other crew members. The reptilian's yellow eyes gleamed with disappointment, so the soft skin returns empty-handed. "What a surprise." "I told you he would find nothing," Nimbo clicked. "Humans lack the instincts needed for successful salvage work. They cannot sense valuable materials like we can." Kiwan said nothing, but inside the armor, sensors were analyzing every being around him. He could see their weaknesses, their strengths, the exact pressure points that would disable them instantly. The knowledge disturbed him. Was this how the original Guardians had started down the path to corruption? "Since your mission was a complete failure," Veltar continued, "I am assigning you to cleaning duty for the next month. Maybe scrubbing floors is more suited to your limited abilities." Before Kiwan could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and the station's automated voice echoed through the corridors. "All personnel to emergency stations. Unknown vessels approaching. All personnel to emergency stations." The crew scattered as everyone rushed to their assigned positions. Kiwan and Bora made their way to the communications center, where Bora's workstation was located. Through the large windows, they could see space filled with ships unlike anything in the galactic databases. The vessels were massive and organic-looking, like creatures that had grown rather than been built. Their hulls were black as the void between stars, and they moved with a fluid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. Energy weapons flickered along their sides like bioluminescent organs on deep-sea creatures. "What are those things?" Bora whispered, her fingers flying over her control panel as she tried to analyze the approaching fleet. Kiwan knew exactly what they were. The armor's database was showing him tactical information about the enemy ships. Information that had been gathered during the war 3,000 years ago. These were devourers, creatures from the spaces between dimensions who fed on the life force of entire civilizations. "Station control to all ships," came a panicked voice over the communicators. "We are under attack by unknown hostiles. All defense vessels engage immediately." Through the windows, Kiwan watched as Nexus Point's defense fleet moved to intercept the attackers. The station's weapons opened fire, sending streams of energy toward the devourer ships, but the attacks seemed to have no effect. The alien vessels absorbed the energy and used it to grow larger and stronger. "Our weapons are not working," Bora said, her voice tight with fear. "The energy readings are going crazy. Those ships are actually getting stronger when we shoot at them." The first devourer ship reached the station's outer defenses and began to feed. Kiwan watched in horror as the creature attached itself to one of the defensive platforms and drained it completely. The metal structure aged decades in seconds, crumbling into rust and dust that the devourer absorbed. "They are going to destroy everything," Bora said. "The entire station, everyone on it." Kiwan made his decision. He could not hide anymore, could not pretend to be weak while thousands of innocent people died around him. The armor responded to his will, flowing out from beneath his clothes to cover his entire body in seconds. Bora gasped and stumbled backward. "Kiwan, what? How?" "I will explain later," Kiwan said, his voice now carrying the harmonic resonance of the armor's systems. "Right now I need to stop those ships." He moved toward the emergency airlock, but Bora grabbed his arm. Even through the armor he could feel her trembling. "You cannot go out there alone," she said. "Those things destroyed our entire defense fleet in minutes." "I have to try," Kiwan replied. "I am the only one who can fight them." "Why? What makes you so special all of a sudden?" Kiwan paused at the airlock door. "Because I remember what we used to be." He activated the airlock and stepped into space. The armor's life support systems engaged automatically, creating a protective field around him that allowed him to survive in the vacuum. Thrusters built into the suit propelled him toward the nearest devourer ship. The creature sensed his approach and turned to face him. Up close, it was even more horrifying than Kiwan had imagined. The ship was alive, covered in what looked like skin rather than metal. Massive eyes opened along its hull, all focusing on the small figure flying toward it. The devourer attacked, sending out tendrils of energy designed to drain Kiwan's life force, but the armor absorbed the attack and converted it into power for its own systems. Kiwan felt strength flowing through him as he closed the distance to the enemy ship. He landed on the creature's hull and placed his hands against its surface. Through the armor he could feel the devourer's alien thoughts, hunger, rage, and an endless desire to consume everything in its path. But beneath that he sensed something else. Fear. The devourer recognized what Kiwan was. It remembered the guardians from the ancient war, remembered how they had been driven back into the darkness between worlds. The creature tried to shake him off, but Kiwan held on and began to channel energy directly into its nervous system. The devourer screamed, a sound that traveled through space itself, and made every person on the station cover their ears in pain. The creature's hull began to crack as Kiwan overloaded its biological systems with pure guardian energy. With a final surge of power, Kiwan destroyed the devourer from within. The massive ship imploded, its biomass collapsing into itself until nothing remained but empty space. The other devourer ships pulled back, clearly surprised by the sudden appearance of a guardian. They had expected to find a defenseless station filled with weak civilizations. Instead, they had encountered their ancient enemy, reborn and ready to fight. Kiwan turned to face the remaining attackers. There were dozens of them, each one capable of destroying the station single-handedly, but he was no longer afraid. The armor was showing him tactical options, battle strategies that had been developed over centuries of warfare. More importantly, he could feel other humans on the station beginning to awaken. The sight of a guardian in action was triggering something deep in their genetic memory. Bora's life force signature was changing, growing brighter as dormant abilities began to surface. "This is Kiwan to Nexus Point," he said, his voice broadcasting on all frequencies. "All humans, listen to me. You are more than you know. You are the children of Guardians, and it is time to remember your heritage." Across the station, humans who had spent their lives being mocked and dismissed suddenly felt power flowing through their veins. In the engineering section, a human technician named Jae-sung found that he could interface directly with the station's computer systems. In the medical bay, a doctor named So-young discovered she could heal injuries with a touch. And in the communications center, Bora felt her mind expanding as she gained the ability to coordinate all of these awakening humans into a unified force. "Kiwan," Bora's voice came through the communicator, stronger and more confident than he had ever heard it. "I can feel them. Humans all across the galaxy are waking up. Whatever you did, it has started something that cannot be stopped." Kiwan smiled inside his helmet as he prepared to face the remaining Devourer ships. The weak species that everyone had mocked was weak no longer. Humanity was remembering what it meant to be Guardian, and the galaxy would never be the same. But the real test was still ahead. Defeating these few ships was just the beginning. The Devourers had been testing the galaxy's defenses, probing for weakness. When they returned, they would come in numbers that could darken the stars themselves. Kiwan would be ready for them. And this time, he would not be fighting alone. 3 weeks after the attack on Nexus Point, Kiwan stood on the observation deck of the battleship Redemption, watching as humanity's new fleet prepared for war. Ships that had been built in orbital yards across human space now filled the void, their hulls gleaming with Guardian technology that had been awakened along with their crews. The transformation had been incredible to witness. As more humans awakened to their true nature, they had begun to remember not just their abilities but also their ancient knowledge. Engineers like Jae-sung could now build ships that bent space around them. Scientists like So-young could manipulate matter at the molecular level, and coordinators like Bora could link the minds of entire fleets, creating a tactical awareness that no enemy could match. But the most important change was not in their abilities. It was in their purpose. Every awakened human understood that their power came with responsibility. They were not conquerors or rulers. They were protectors, guardians of all life in the galaxy. "The Devourer fleet is 3 hours out," Bora reported from her position at the communication station. Her abilities had grown tremendously, allowing her to coordinate not just the human fleet but also the alien vessels that had joined them. Long-range sensors show over 1,000 ships. Kiwan nodded, his armor displaying tactical information directly into his vision. The Devourers were coming in force this time, determined to crush humanity before they could fully awaken. It would be the largest space battle in galactic history. "What about our allies?" Kiwan asked. "The Velkhani have sent 200 ships," Bora replied. "The Zephyrians contributed 50 of their heavy cruisers. Even the Goraks have sent their battleships, though their crews still seem confused about why they are helping the weak humans." Kiwan smiled at that. The alien species that had once mocked humanity were now fighting alongside them. The transformation had not been easy for anyone to accept. When humans had first demonstrated their awakened abilities, fear had been the initial reaction. Some species had worried that humanity would seek revenge for years of humiliation. But Kiwan and the other awakened humans had made it clear that they bore no grudges. Their power was not meant for domination but for protection. They had even shared some of their Guardian technology with their former tormentors, helping to upgrade alien ships and weapons for the coming battle. "Incoming transmission from the Velkhani flagship," Bora announced. Veltar's face appeared on the main screen, but the reptilian looked very different from the arrogant crew Chief Kiwan remembered. His posture was respectful, almost humble as he spoke. "Guardian Kiwan," Veltar said, using the title that all the alien species had begun to employ. "My crew wishes to apologize for our past behavior. We did not understand what you truly were." "There is nothing to apologize for," Kiwan replied. "You saw only what we appeared to be, not what we could become. That was our choice, not yours." "Still," Veltar continued, "I want you to know that the Velkhani stand with humanity in this fight. We have learned much about the Guardians' history in the past weeks. Your ancestors saved our species from extinction long ago. It is time for us to return that favor." Similar messages had come from dozens of other species as the truth about humanity's past had spread throughout the galaxy. The Guardian archives, accessed through the ancient ship Kiwan had found, contained detailed records of every species the original Guardians had protected. Many of the galaxy's current civilizations owed their very existence to human sacrifice. "All ships prepare for battle," Kiwan announced on the fleet-wide channel. "Remember, we are not fighting for conquest or glory. We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We fight because it is our duty as Guardians." The response was immediate. Across the fleet, humans and aliens alike acknowledged the orders. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of species were united under a single purpose. The weak had become strong, and the strong had learned humility. The Devourer fleet emerged from hyperspace like a cancer spreading across the stars. Their ships were even larger than before, swollen with the energy they had consumed from other worlds. At their head flew the Hive Mother, a creature so massive that it blocked out entire constellations. "My God," whispered Jae-sung from the engineering station. "That thing is the size of a moon." Kiwan felt a moment of doubt. The enemy was larger and more numerous than anything the original Guardians had ever faced. But then he sensed the other awakened humans around him, their determination burning like stars in his awareness, and beyond them he felt the presence of their alien allies, ready to fight and die for a cause they finally understood. "All ships, engage," Kiwan ordered. The battle that followed would be remembered for generations. The combined fleet met the Devourers head-on, Guardian technology combining with alien innovation to create weapons and tactics that neither side could have developed alone. Human ships danced through space like living things, their movements coordinated by Bora's tactical network. Alien vessels provided devastating firepower, their crews fighting with a courage inspired by humanity's example. Kiwan led the charge personally, his armor allowing him to survive in the vacuum of space as he fought from ship to ship. But this time he was not alone. Other humans had learned to use Guardian armor, and they formed a squadron of warriors that moved through the battle like angels of war. The tide turned when Kiwan reached the Hive Mother. The massive creature tried to drain his life force, but the Guardian armor converted the attack into power. Kiwan channeled that energy back into the Hive Mother's own systems, overloading the creature's ability to process it. As the Hive Mother died, its death scream carried across the psychic networks that connected all Devourers. The remaining ships began to retreat, finally understanding that their ancient enemies had returned stronger than before. "Let them go," Kiwan ordered, as some of the fleet moved to pursue. "We have won this battle, but the war may continue for years. We will need our strength for the fights to come." In the aftermath of the battle, as the fleet regrouped and tended to their wounded, Kiwan found himself back on Nexus Point. The station had been repaired and expanded, now serving as the headquarters for the new Galactic Council. Representatives from every species worked together, with humans taking their place not as rulers but as equals. Kiwan walked through the salvage bay where his journey had begun, now converted into a training facility for new Guardians. Young humans learned to control their awakening abilities while alien instructors taught them about the species they would one day protect. "Do you ever miss it?" Bora asked, joining him by the large windows that looked out into space. "The simple life when all you had to worry about was lifting cargo containers?" Kiwan considered the question. His life was infinitely more complicated now. As the first awakened Guardian, he had become a symbol and a leader whether he wanted to or not. The weight of responsibility was enormous, and he knew that future battles would test him in ways he could not imagine. But when he looked out at the stars, he no longer saw a cold and hostile universe where humans were the weakest link. He saw a galaxy full of life that needed protection, species that were learning to work together, and a future where strength was measured not by physical power, but by the willingness to sacrifice for others. "No," Kiwan said finally. "I do not miss it. We were never meant to be weak, Bora. We were meant to be Guardians. It just took us a while to remember." As he spoke, Kiwan felt the presence of other awakened humans across the galaxy. Some were exploring ancient Guardian sites, recovering lost technology and knowledge. Others were helping younger species develop their civilizations. And some, like him, were preparing for the next threat that would inevitably emerge from the darkness. The armor around his body pulsed gently, reminding him that he was no longer just Kiwan the salvage worker. He was Guardian Kiwan, protector of the galaxy, heir to a legacy that stretched back through the ages. It was a burden he would carry gladly, knowing that his strength came not from the armor he wore but from the humanity he had never lost. The weak had become strong. The mocked had become protectors. And in the vast expanse of space, new legends were being born every day. The galaxy was safe for now, and Kiwan would make sure it stayed that way. No matter what the cost, outside the window the stars shone a little brighter, as if the universe itself was celebrating humanity's return to its rightful place among them. The Guardians had come home at last.